Continuation of the Edgar Cayce Handbook for Creating Your Future by Mark Thurston and Christopher Fazel. Part 1, Basic Principles for Creating Your Future. Principle number 1. Mind is the builder. What you think, you become. While in college, Jerry attended a weekend seminar called Preparing for the Future. Included in the seminar was a workshop that involved writing down in as much detail as possible just what you would like to be doing in 20 years. Jerry gave this exercise serious attention and did his best to visualize an ideal day 20 years into the future. Participants concluded the exercise by putting the document into a sealed envelope, which would then be stashed away where it wouldn't be thought about or lost. All this Jerry did, and as was expected, he forgot all about it. By a curious coincidence, he found the envelope almost to the day 20 years later. As he read over the ancient document, he was amazed and tickled to discover that he was now actually living his projected scenario with uncanny accuracy. What does this true story tell us? That Jerry was psychic and he had successfully predicted the future? Maybe. But more likely, what happened to Jerry is an illustration of something deeper and more profound, a principle that was articulated over and over in the psychic readings of Edgar Cayce's Mind is the Builder. In other words, with the awesome power of your mind, you can create your future, your situation in the world, even the very person that you are. That power is a very special gift of the creative force or God. What is this gift of the mind, the fundamental aspect of your soul? Is it your ability to analyze and calculate? Is it your ability to visualize and imagine possibilities? Is it the mysterious part of you that concocts dreams every night while you sleep? Actually, it's all of these things. Your mind is versatile and multifaceted, and it's the bridge between the realm of spirit and the world of the physical reality. The phrase "mind is the builder" is usually found in the Cayce readings as part of a spiritual law that summarizes the creative process itself. In its entirety, the formula states, spirit is the life, mind is the builder, and the physical is the result. These simple words describe the most basic processes of life. Understanding the concept gives you a potent tool in your pursuit of happiness. The formula begins with the source and the essence of all life, the spirit, the foundation of all things, the raw power from which everything is born. The Greeks named it Pneuma. The Hindus called it Shakti. The Sioux Indians, Wakanda. In Western religions, it's often referred to as the power of God. The Cayce readings label it the creative force. But regardless of its name, the spirit is the source of all that is. How does this spiritual force express itself in the three-dimensional world of time, space, and form? Through the activity of mind. It's probably easier to grasp this formula with an analogy. Think of it as a slide projector. The light bulb corresponds to the source of light, or life rather, the screen to the material world. The slide represents the mind, that transparent film that takes the source of light, shapes it into a pattern and color, and projects the image onto a material screen. The mind works in the same way. With a unique mixture of attitudes, emotions, logical analysis, and intuition, it first creates a pattern using the pure energy of spirit. The mind shapes a thought form, which is analogous to a single slide, and of course you've created many different thought forms, all stored as memory patterns, like the slides in a carousel tray. At any moment of the day, one of your slides is chosen from the memory storehouse, is reanimated by the source light, and eventually projects into your three-dimensional world of physical matter. These thought forms are quite real. Although they aren't a physical reality, they do shape the physical world according to their patterns. One Cayce reading says simply that thoughts are things and are as real as a pin stuck into your hand. At first, it may take a little effort to appreciate the reality of this thought form world. Where is a thought? What does it look like? And how can it be real? If you can't grasp or measure it, both Cayce and the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung describe the world of thought as the fourth dimension. the dimension of ideas. For example, what makes this book you're reading real? Is it the weight of the paper and the color of the ink? That's a superficial explanation. A more profound answer to this question suggests that the reality of thought may be embodied in the ideas that come to life in your mind through the miracle of the written word. Even more fascinating, the same idea can be shared with any number of other people scattered throughout the world and even throughout the generations. An idea isn't limited to space or time. Dreams often give us a peek into the creative realm of thought forms. Consider the following story. A woman came to Edgar Cayce and asked for a reading to interpret a strange dream that she had had. She had dreamed that she was holding her arms out before her with her palms turned upward. Encircling both forearms was a series of diamond bracelets. It so happened that she and her husband had been trying to conceive a child for several months. The interpretation was that on the night of the dream they had succeeded in their effort. The bracelets in the dream symbolized the joy that the woman would feel cradling the baby in her arms. This much of the story by itself is enough to make one marvel at the subtle faculties of the mind. But even more remarkable is that the woman's sister, living miles away, had had the same dream that same night. She too had dreamed of her sister, her forearms bedecked with diamond bracelets, an illustration of how, through the unlimited nature of the fourth dimensional world, that we can be made sensitive to the thought forms of others. So how long does it take how long does it take for a physical or for a thought to build into the physical? If spirit is the life, mind is the builder, and the physical is the result, how long does it take for the mind to project a fourth dimensional thought form into the world of concrete physical reality? That's a good question. Unfortunately, there isn't a simple answer. The timing depends on many factors. For example, before a house can exist, it must be built. But before it can be built, you must decide on wood or stone. It needs to be designed. That starts with an idea in the mind of an architect. Then, once the fourth dimensional thought form image has been created, how long does it take for the design to be translated into a physical house? First, how grand or complicated is the design? If it's a log cabin, it may be built in a few days. If it's a castle, it'll take longer. Second, how much sweat and elbow grease will be applied to the project? If the builder works 10 hours a day, the house will materialize twice as fast, as it will if the builder only works 5 hours a day. In essence, the time gap between mind as the builder and the physical is the result. Boils down to two factors: the scope of what's being built and the perseverance of those who are laboring for it. For most people who lack consistent, persistent effort is the obstacle. Most of us are good at dreaming up grand ideas, but we fail to work at them until we can move them from the fourth dimension to the third. For example, a high school student was lying on the living room couch, lamenting to his mother that he'd only had a few days to complete a term paper. Of course, upon being questioned, he admitted that the assignment had been given several weeks earlier. Then, in the midst of a stretch, he yawned and said, "I guess I was just made to be a procrastinator, and there's not a thing I can do about it." When people with a tendency toward procrastination asked Cayce how to succeed with their projects, he usually gave the same terse advice: work like thunder. The hatching process. The spirit is the life, mind is the builder, the physical is the result. This formula explains the creative process. But if we examine it more carefully, what clues emerge to tell us more about how these steps unfold? First comes conception, also known as inspiration, the awakening of a possibility of something new. Second is incubation, a time of accumulating energies. Think of the idea as an embryo or an egg that needs nourishment and time. Through incubation, it accrues the energy needed to penetrate the world of matter. Finally, when the moment is right, the inspiration starts to materialize. That's birth, or better yet, the hatching of the idea. Many mythologies throughout the world, Greek, Finnish, Hindu, Japanese, and Egyptian to name a few, use the image of the egg to describe the creation of the universe. In one version of the Egyptian myth, the first act of creation began with the formation of an egg out of primeval water. From this egg broke forth Ra, the sun god, and the immediate cause of all life on earth. The egg motif is still with us today when we speak of hatching a plot or hatching an idea. The world is full of overnight successes, who in fact spent years honing their craft or deepening their study. One young writer named Barry Kemp suddenly moved to Hollywood and seemed to take the town by storm. First, he worked as a staff comedy writer for the hit series Taxi. Then he went on to create the blockbuster hit comedies Coach and Newhart. To a casual observer, he was a classic overnight success. Yet for years, Barry had crawled out of bed every morning at 5 o'clock to spend 2 hours writing television scripts that no one ever read. That's the incubation period that precedes the hatching. It's a period not of idleness, but of inner work, a preparation for the opportunities that will come as a direct consequence of mental building. The mental body. It's important to remember that the mind is building with every thought. A current slogan reminds us that you are what you eat, and in a very real sense, that's true. If you eat an apple, your digestive system breaks it down into elemental parts. Your blood carries the elements throughout your body, and your cells assimilate it. All this happens in a marvelously coordinated effort. Just as the food you eat is assimilated into your physical body, so is every thought you think assimilated into what the CAYCE readings call your mental body. This mental body is the living memory of all thoughts, attitudes, and actions that you choose, moment to moment, throughout your life. Does the notion of a mental body seem strange to you? Well, consider this. CAYCE maintained that the mental body becomes your home when you're finished with your current physical incarnation. In other words, after death, you live in the body that you mentally built during your life. But this concept isn't limited to the CAYCE readings. In A Christmas Carol, the famous Yuletide story by Charles Dickens, the disagreeable protagonist Ebenezer Scrooge meets the spirit of his deceased cohort in usury, Jacob Marley. Marley's spirit visits him dragging a huge chain. When Scrooge asks when he got it, or where he got it, Marley shrieks, "I made this chain link by link and yard by yard." Of course, a positive view may just as well taken in regard to this maxim. Each of us has the power to build a paradise through our thoughts, attitudes, and actions. The near-death experience. Most people are now familiar with the term near-death experience. There are thousands of individuals who, for one reason or another, have technically died, yet with modern medical technology, have been successfully revived. Researchers have interviewed many who have had this experience, and it's striking to see common themes and images which thread together these different accounts. People report viewing their physical bodies from above, dispassionate observers of what's going on in a hospital room, for example. Then they turn and move into another space or realm, a process which they often describe as a passing through a tunnel. And at the end, there is usually an encounter with a being of love and light. Sometimes this being simply tells the person that he or she must go back. However, on other occasions, this being asks, "What have you done with your life?" When such a question is raised, individuals in the near-death experience are presented with a panorama of their entire life. Every action, every thought, even the influence of those actions and thoughts on others. Often they describe this panorama as being three-dimensional in full color, with every scene appearing simultaneously. There's probably no better description of what it would be like to live in one's mental body. There are thoughts, and then there are thoughts. What is the natural reaction to giving serious consideration to the principle that mind is the builder? Anxiety, probably. Nervous concern that some of your attitudes and emotions aren't ones you'd like to carry with you into eternity? Anna carried this anxiety to an extreme. She speculated that a single truly bad thought could ruin beyond repair her bliss in the afterlife. Her concern grew until she developed a nearly obsessive fear of thinking. Then one day she was fortunate enough to share this concern with a wise old woman who had spent years living the philosophy found in the CAYCE readings. This elderly woman put her troubled mind to rest. Your mind is like a tree, and the thoughts that enter your mind are like birds. It's not so important which birds light on a branch of your tree for a moment and then fly on. What matters is which birds you allow to build a nest in your tree and make a home there. There's probably not a fleeting thought that we all haven't held at one time or another, but the thoughts that build our reality are those we feed on day after day. Overriding the automatic pilot. Our minds are building reality with every moment, but most of the time we aren't conscious of this creative process. Our attitudes and thought patterns become habitual. We don't see how frequently we keep building and rebuilding some old favorites. Of course, some of these mental habits may be desirable, but others might benefit from a change if we could only recognize them clearly. There are a couple of ways you can begin to wake up to your habits of thinking. The first approach is dream study. Since dreams occur when you're asleep, it may sound paradoxical to state that they can help you become aware of your mental habits. But dreams are an adventure into the world of thought forms. In them, you confront directly some of your patterns that you've been sustaining with your attitudes and emotions. Dreams help you recognize more clearly what you're doing each day at a fourth dimensional level. With practice, plus some basic instruction and interpersonal skills, you can discover more and more about your inner world. The best way to enhance your dream recall is to do some sincere work with your dreams. Strong intentions and desires are powerful agents. Then follow a few simple techniques: pad of paper, a dream journal by the bedside, falling asleep, repeating silently to yourself several times, "I remember my dreams when I wake up." And when you do wake up, spend a moment lying still in bed. Allow those elusive dream images to come back into your mind. Most likely you'll remember its conclusion of a dream, so try to remember the sequence of action in reverse by asking yourself, what was I doing just before that? Then be sure to write down your dream as soon as you can. If you wait until later, most of the details will be lost. But another approach is self-observation. It enables you to observe your own thinking process in the moment. The Cayce readings called this standing aside and watching yourself go by. Through self-observation, you can begin to see which attitudes constantly run through the mind as an inner dialogue of talk. You may start to recognize which circumstances set off particular emotional responses, and in fact, the presence of powerful emotions intensifies the building process. For example, love and hate both provide extra energy for your creative mind. Of course, the question is, which emotions do you want to use in building your mental body? With self-observation, you can also begin to recognize the different roles you play and the accompanying phrases that you use in speaking to yourself throughout the day. Sometimes self-observation is a humbling experience, but it can also be fun, enlightening. You may discover what you've been feeding your mind, phrases such as "I can't do that," "I'm stupid," "I just hate that." This may not be a happy revelation, but at the same time, you can make a conscious effort to feed your mind new phrases such as "nothing ventured, nothing gained," or "I'm making real progress," or "I'm going to learn a lot more from this no matter what happens." The new affirmations may feel artificial at first, just because you're not used to them and this is the first stage, but it is reorienting the mind. Small as these efforts may seem, it puts you onto a road that's more constructive and allows for a more successful future. Lao Tzu Tao Te Ching, a kernel of Chinese Taoist wisdom, says the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. The long journey comes down to this key: you are a creative spiritual being. What you do with your mind becomes your destiny. And here's the exercise. Practice self-observation, standing aside, watching yourself go by. The focus of your observations will be your inner world of your thoughts, feelings, rather than the events in the outer world. It's not easy to sustain attention for this kind of self-observation, but try to do it 3 times a day for about a minute. Watch your own inner dialogue, mental dialogue, what goes on among the aspects of yourself. What's the quality of your inner talk? Argumentative, optimistic, self-condemning, hopeful? Recognize the kind of future that you're creating with those thoughts and feelings. Page 15, end. Next video will be principle number 2, changing anything starts with motives and ideals.